Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah alladhi abda'a al-aflaq wal-ardeen. والصلاة على من كان نبيا وآدم بين الماء والطين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ورفعنا لك ذكرك. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. ببركة إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا Muhammadin. After praising Allah Almighty Jalla Jalaluhu and after sending infinite peace and salutations, durood and salawat upon the best of creation, the light of creation, the purpose of creation, Sayyidul Awwaleen wal Akhirin, Sayyidul Anbiya wal Mursaleen, Sultan Medina, Noor Sina, Ahmad Mustafa wal Mujtaba sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Honorable and respectable ulama karam, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just before we look at the topic at hand, I want to just very quickly express my gratitude to the organization Seekers of the Beloved, and bil khusus my gratitude to Hazrat Allama Ustad Abdul Qadir Sahib Damat Barkatum al-Aliyah wal Qudsiyah for inviting a nobody like myself on this occasion of the Mawlid of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Get into this habit now, that whenever you see or you hear, should I say, whenever you hear me say Rasulullah, okay, tile. If Shahid Afridi hit his sixer that day, sorry, not cheetah. If Shahid Afridi hit, he didn't hit any sixers. Fuel there's some enough fikr karo. As a fuel pani wasta hai. ठीक है. नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम said, "Man nasiya salata alayya nasiya tariq al-jannati." और कमा क़ाल अलैहि सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम. ये ना समझो ऐसा आपने फ़ायदे वास्ते आखने हैं, बल्कि this is for your own benefit. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that person who forgets, and insan is somebody who forgets. Root word is from nasiya, insan. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that person who forgets to send durood and salam upon me, that person has forgotten his path to Jannatul Firdaus. Jannat ka rasta can only be attained through Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Nobody is getting their place in paradise except if Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam grants you a place in Jannatul Firdaus. Ye hamara iman aur aqidah hai. So when you hear me say Rasulullah, say it like you mean it. Not because I put this responsibility on you. Sallallahu alayhi wa. I'm not moving any further until you say it with a lot of passion, dedication, with such iman and aqidah that you're sat here in Dudley and he can hear you in Madinatul Munawwar. Rasulullah, Rasulullah. One more time, 3 sunnah. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I'm getting into that habit. I don't want to have to repeat myself, otherwise it gets a bit boring. Alhamdulillah, like I was saying, blessed and fortunate are we here now to be sitting in the house of Allah Almighty and to be remembering His beloved Habib Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is Allah's karam upon you and me. Allah's favor and karam upon you and me, that we can sit in His house And we can remember his beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And ultimately this is acting upon an ayat of the Quran, hatta an order from Allah Almighty, when he says, وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala says in the Quran that remember ni'mat Allah, the blessings of Allah Almighty, alaykum, upon you. Remember what? Now that's another habit. You need to get into this routine or this habit of interacting with me. And I want to know whether you've heard or not. So what is our duty? To remember ni'mat Allah, the blessings of Allah Almighty. And the greatest blessing, and ni'matul uzma, the greatest blessing that Allah Almighty has bestowed upon His creation is none other than Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. None other than Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah's greatest blessing upon you and me. So by you and me sitting here, we are acting upon that hukam and order that Allah has asked us to do in the Quran. Or ye fil amr ka siga waskuru. Allah has ordered you and me to sit, remember, rejoice, celebrate, commemorate the life and praise the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahu Akbar. Imam Jalaluddin As-Suyuti rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, that great Marde Kalandar Ashik Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who passed away in the year 911 AH, wrote 737 books in his lifetime. Ajkal ka Imam Nisan. 737 books in his lifetime. Allahu Akbar. Master in every science of the deen. Master in every ulum, every funun. Imam Jalaluddin As-Suyuti rahmatullahi ta'ala. And not just a great scholar, but a great lover of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He says that I saw Ra'aytu Rasulullahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam 70 marratan. He goes, I saw in a wakeful state. Tawajjuh says so no. Who is saying this? Imam As-Suyuti rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. They said that I saw in a wakeful state. In a wakeful state. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam 70 times during my life. Allahu Akbar. 70 times during his lifetime, he saw Nabi sallallahu wasallam in a wakeful state. Then imagine how many times he saw the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in his dreams. Aam Maulvi ni, Aam Imam ni. Ajkal the Imam title gets thrown around very lightly, you know. Wallahi, we don't consider ourselves to be Imam. We are nothing. We are, well, that's your something. We are nothing. Allahu Akbar. In the grand schemes of things, we are nothing. If great ulama like the great Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhu can sit with his people and his murideen and students, and he can say to his students, that if on the day of Qiyamah Allah Almighty enters you into Jannatul Firdaus, then you ask Allah Almighty, where is Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq? These are Asr Imams. He goes that if you, as my students, as my murideen, as those who come to my majlis and my majma, if you find that on the day of Qiyamah you don't see me in Jannatul Firdaus, then you ask Allah, where is our Ustad? Where is our Imam? Huzur Data Ali Hujwari rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, they do nakal of this in the Kashf al-Mahjub. This is the ajizi of these Imams. Ajkal ne Imam nahi. Do kitaba pari the bas ji. Aapne aap Shaykh al-Islam samjhne. Mufakhir millat samjhne. No. Ilm, the greatest quality of ilm is that you should become a person of humility. Ajizi. That you walk on the earth with humility. These great Imams, why is it that their names are still being mentioned today? Why is it that the legacy has still continued and will continue up until the day of Qiyamah? Because these were those Imams who were not only drowned in the ishq and muhabbat of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, but they were also ulama, scholars of humility. Ajizi. وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. Allahu Akbar. Imam Suyuti rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, he mentions in his book, Hawil al-Fatawi, that the greatest ni'mah, going one step further, the greatest ni'mah, the greatest blessing that Allah Almighty has bestowed upon you and me is not just sending the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it's the birth and the wiladat of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's the mawlid of Rasulullah sallallahu. Bolo tesina sallallahu. Koi katna tani tu sana kam, balke badna hai tu sana kam. Every time you say the Durood Sharif, you get what? How many good deeds? 10 good deeds. Allah forgives you for 10 of your sins. Allah raises you by 10 darajat. Kamine kiya bande, bakhil kiya bande. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Revive these dead hearts by sending salawat upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Revive these dead hearts by sending durood and salawat upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the purpose of these gatherings, that we remind ourselves that we are ummatis of that beloved of Allah Almighty sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We refresh our iman. We remind ourselves that we are Muslims, and ultimately that we have a duty to Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Our duty isn't just to gather wealth, jam'un wa malan wa addaka. Our duty and responsibility isn't just to pay bills and to make sure that our mortgage has been covered. Our duty and responsibility isn't to chase the dunya and run after the dunya. Our duty and responsibility is to drown ourselves in the ishq and ghulami of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Drown ourselves in the ishq and ghulami of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Become true and sincere lovers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahu Akbar. I was mentioning in Watford earlier today. This is why I was late. My apologies. Watford, we've started a new human rights course. And we were talking about how the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the prophet of justice and fairness. And there's one particular waqia that I mentioned in my notes as well, that the Sahabi Sayyidina Usayd bin Hudayr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who was one of the chief of the Ansar's tribe, the tribe of the Ansar. And this Usayd bin Hudayr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he was also that Sahabi that when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam entered into Makkah al-Mukarramah, Fateh Makkah, on one side was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, on the other side was Usayd bin Hudayr radiyallahu ta'ala. Aam Sahabi ni, Jaleel Qadr Sahab, Usayd bin Hudayr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He used to be a very comical person. My da'wah was what? Become true lovers of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Drown yourself in the ishq and ghulami of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Like the Sahaba drowned themselves. Usayd bin Hudayr radiyallahu ta'ala used to be a very comical man. He used to crack jokes. He used to make people laugh. In one particular majlis, Sahaba was sitting there. So too was Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Usayd bin Hudayr was making a joke, making the Sahaba laugh. And whilst he was making this joke, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took their stick. Huzur Ziya'ul Ummat rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi mentioned this waqia in the Ziya'ul Nabi Sharif. Hamare dada ustad Ziya'ul Ummat Pir Karam Shah al-Azhari rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, they mentioned this in the Ziya'ul Nabi, this waqia, Dalil. Usayd bin Hudayr was trying to make the Sahaba laugh. At that point, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam took the asar, this blessed stick, and they poked Usayd bin Hudayr in the stomach. And they said, Usayd, that's enough. That's enough. At that point, Usayd bin Hudayr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he goes, Ya Rasulullah, you have hurt me. I want revenge. I want badla, I want compensation. You've hurt me. Allah. At that point, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, are you sure? He says, I am sure. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Usayd, if you want revenge, come and take revenge. If you want to avenge the action that I've done, come take your revenge. Allah. At that point, Usayd bin Hudayr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, Ya Rasulullah, Ya Habib Allah, when you poked me with your asar, your stick, my shirt was off.
Allah.
Gulami of the Sahaba Ikram. Ishq or muhabbat of the Sahaba Ikram. Drown yourselves in this ishq. He goes that, Ya Rasulullah, my shirt was removed from my body. What I want in return is for you to remove your shirt as well.
Allah.
Can you imagine this? A Sahabi saying this to the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At that point, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam removed their blessed shirt. The flesh of the blessed stomach of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could be seen. And as soon as Usayd bin Hudayr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu saw the flesh of the blessed stomach of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he stood up and he ran towards Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He ran towards Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And he began to hold on to the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he took his lips and he began to kiss the blessed stomach of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ishq aur ghulami, pyar aur muhabbat of the Sahaba ikram. He began to kiss the blessed stomach of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he goes, Ya Rasulullah, this is what I wanted. This is what I wanted. That my lips touch your blessed stomach, Ya Rasulullah. Aqidah of the Sahaba. Ajkal ka Maulvi hoga na, shirk, bid'ah. Tell me, where are you going to put these waqiyat there? What are you going to call? A Sahabi, a mushrik now? And this is just one waqiyat, one incident. Everybody who listens to my Mawlid talks, I always mention that waqiyah of Sayyidina Sawad al-Ansari radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Battle of Badr. How Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was straightening the rows. And after Zoq or Shok, I mention it again. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Battle of Badr, 313 Sahaba, ready to face an army of 1,000. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam come out of their tent. Sahaba are excited, making noise. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says to them, be quiet. Remember Allah. Remember Allah. At that point, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam took the arrow and began to straighten the rows. They began to straighten the rows. As they were straightening the rows, Sayyidina Sawad, he was out of position. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said to Sawad, Sawad, stand straight. You are a soldier in the army of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We don't need people who stand weak, delay. We need people who stand strong and stand straight in the army of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. At that point, when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam poked Sawad in the stomach with the arrow, Sayyidina Sawad, he turned around and he goes, Ya Rasulullah, I want badla. I want recompense, I want compensation. At that point, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, rest of the Sahaba, they started looking at him. What is Sawad saying? What is he saying? But this is Rahmatan lil Alameen. This is the Prophet of mercy, the Prophet of peace, the Prophet of justice. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam there and then put the arrow down. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam lifted their blessed kameez, their shirt. And they said, Sawad, if you want revenge, if you want to avenge the action that I did upon you, come take your revenge. Come take your badla. When Sawad al-Ansari radiyallahu ta'ala anhu saw the blessed stomach of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he dropped his spear and he ran towards Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He ran towards Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when he got and reached the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, got to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he began to embrace Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he took his lips and he began to kiss the blessed stomach of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why is it that we hide these waqiyat and these stories from our youth today? Become those people who are sincere in your love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't say to Sawad, Sawad, what you're doing is shirk. Nowhere, Sirat ibn Hisham ka waqiyah na. Battle of Badr. Nowhere did Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Sawad, what you're doing is shirk or bid'ah. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew that this was the ishq and ghulami of his Sahabi. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam allowed him to kiss their blessed stomach. Eventually Sawad went and stood back in his line, in his row, and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they wanted to know why Sawad did this. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam went up to him, and yet something that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam didn't know the reason. No, Allah Ta'ala gave him this ilm. Like Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wanted to hear from Sawad, what was the reasoning? At that point Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Sawad, tell me, why did you do this? Jawab suno, iman taza karo. At that point, Sayyidina Sawad al-Ansari radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he goes, Ya Rasulullah, Ya Habiballah, we are facing imminent death. Maut is in front of us. We are about to sacrifice our life for the sake of Deen Islam. And I wanted that just before I give my life in the way of Allah, that my lips touch your blessed stomach, Ya Rasulullah. This is what I wanted. Can you imagine this? Can you imagine this? This is the Aqeedah of the Sahaba Ikram. At that point, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, Sawad, if this is your reason, then let it be known that Jahannam has become haram upon you. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam giving the glad tidings of Jannah to his Sahaba just before the Battle of Badr. Sawad, let it be known that Jahannam, the fires of hell, have become haram upon you. Another point, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam raised their blessed hands and they did dua of barakat and khair for Sayyidina Sawad al-Ansari. कहने का मकसद ये है that become true lovers of Rasulullah sallallahu. And one of the signs of love that Qadi Iyad mentions in his Ash-Shifa is that when a lover hears the name of his beloved, he always says sallallahu. Oh, bola tasina, kiya miltapane ho? Sallallahu. Are you shy? Embarrassed? You don't want to take his name? Don't want to say durood and salawat upon him? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahu Akbar wa lillahi alhamd. And remembering the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in reality is remembering Allah Almighty. Jalla Jalaluhu. Doing the dhikr of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in reality is doing the dhikr of Rasulullah, is in reality doing the dhikr of Allah Almighty Jalla Jalaluhu. Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala says in the Quran that if you want peace and tranquility, and आजकल हर बंदा है मेरे को ये प्रॉब्लम है इमाम साहब दुआ मांगो, फलाने फलाने पीर को जाने या तावीज़ लेने या फूफू करने वास्ते इमाम साहब ये प्रॉब्लम है वो प्रॉब्लम है. Hey, Allah gives you a solution to your problems in the Quran. Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. That if you want a solution to your problems, whatever the problem may be, then the way you get this solution is through the remembrance of Allah Almighty. The dhikr of Allah Almighty. The way you get this peace and tranquility in your heart is through the remembrance of Allah Almighty. Achha, sawal ye hai that what is the remembrance of Allah? Doing tilawat of the Quran is the remembrance of Allah. This is one form of remembrance. Doing tasbih, hamd upon Allah Almighty, this is another form of remembering Allah. Taking your forehead and putting it on the ground and saying Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, this is another way of remembering Allah Almighty. Then Imam Mujahid rahmatullahi ta'ala, student of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, they said that dhikrullah here is zikr Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Here when Allah Almighty is saying dhikrullah, the remembrance of Allah, in reality here, qala bi Muhammadin wa ashabihi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Here Allah Almighty is referring to the remembrance of not just the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, but also his companions and his Sahaba ikram as well. So when you remember Allah Almighty, when you remember Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, then Allah's mercy descends upon you. In the dhikr salihin tanzilur rahmah. Imam Shafi'i sums it up beautifully. He goes that when you sit and remember the pious predecessors, and let it be known there is nobody more greater in piety than the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Lekin Imam Shafi'i, Muhammad bin Idris al-Shafi'i, he goes that when you sit in a majlis, in a gathering, and you remember the pious predecessors, then Allah Almighty's mercy begins to descend upon you. Allah's mercy begins to descend upon you. What more do you need in life? What more do you need in life? What more do you need? If you have the mercy of Allah Almighty, Jalla Jalaluhu, and you have this sakinatul qalb, this peace and tranquility in your heart, then what more do you need? Arey, pehla pegham ye hai na. Become true lovers of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And a way of becoming a true lover of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is by absorbing yourself in his remembrance. Become fana in the dhikr of Rasulullah sallallahu. Fana fil Rasul. This is that concept. And fana fil Rasul doesn't just mean how when you come to the majlis, then you remember him sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And then when you leave the majlis, go back into your homes and go back into your daily routine, then you forget him. Ye acha soda nahi. Ye acha soda nahi. True remembrance of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, you will find in that ayat of the Quran when Allah Almighty says, Fattabi'uni. This is true remembrance of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That you follow in the next qadam the sunnat and seerat of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Oh Baba, ye na socho that he needs you and me. Ye na samjho that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is muhtaj upon you and me. No, in reality, we are in need of him. We are in need of him in order to illuminate our world, in order to revive our dead hearts. What does Allah Hazrat say? चमक तुझसे पाते हैं सब पाने वाले मेरा दिल भी चमका दे चमकाने वाले. We need him to revive our dead hearts. And in reality, my brothers and sisters who are listening to me, today you and we are dead. Don't be fooled by the attire that we have and the beards that we have and the niqabs and the scarves that we wear. This is an outer appearance. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah will look at what's in your heart. And today our hearts are dead. Illa mashallah. Today our hearts are dead. We walk on the earth, but in reality we are dead. And the only way to resurrect our hearts, the only way to bring our heart back to life, is through the remembrance of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Follow in the Naqsh Qadam. Follow in the footsteps of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And become like the Sahaba Ikram. Become like the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Battle of Khandaq, 5th year after Hijrah. 10,000 of the enemy come on the outskirts of Madinatul Munawwara. Under the leadership of Abu Sufyan, who at this point is a day Muslim. Nabi Islam becomes aware of this. He calls a meeting, consultation session with the Sahaba Ikram. In that meeting, in that majlis is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala. Subhanallah. Afdalul Bashar ba'd al-Anbiya. Or ye aam majlis nahi. This is the majlis of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Nabi Islam is the moon, and the stars are sat there taking their shine from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ashabik al-Nujum. They are sat there taking the shine from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is there. Umar Farooq is there. Usman Ghani is there. Ali Murtaza, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'een are there. Subhanallah. Nabi Islam consulted Sahaba that the enemy, 10,000 of them, are on the outskirts of Medina. What should we do? What should we do? This is the example of the leadership of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That what should we do? At that point, Salman al-Farsi radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he stood up and said, Ya Rasulullah, in Persia, when the enemy would come and attack us like this, they would surround the city, what we would do is dig the trench. What we would do is, we would dig a trench in order to defend our city, in order to defend our land. Nabi Islam at that point said, Salman, this idea of yours is an idea that I accept. Nabi Islam didn't say, I'm a Nabi of Allah, who are you, Salman? Huh? This is the leadership of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. These qualities of leadership, our hukmaran, our leaders, don't demonstrate these qualities today. They don't demonstrate these qualities today. We need to become those individuals who follow in the Naqsh Qadam of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Become individuals who absorb themselves in the following the example and in the footsteps and the Naqsh Qadam of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Nabi Islam accepted the idea of Salman al-Farsi radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Sahaba began digging the trench. In the digging of the trench, Nabi Islam also participated as well. Leadership, leading by example. Nabi Islam also participated in the digging of the trench as well. For 3 days. How many days? 3 days. Sahaba Ikram, with the assistance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are digging the trench. And for 3 days, they have nothing to eat, nothing to drink, very little to drink. At that point, in order to keep themselves upright, Sahaba, they tie a stone to their stomach. This is the sacrifice of the Sahaba Ikram. And what sacrifices have we made today? We struggle to wake up for our Fajr in the morning. What is our sacrifice? That we just march once a year in the streets, a jalus, that we come out and do our protest once a year, and that's it. That's our sacrifice for the deen. Humne sochna hai na. What qurbani, what sacrifice have we made for Islam? Sahaba sacrificed their tan, man, dan, everything they had for deen Islam. Everything they had for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahu Akbar. In order to keep themselves upright, they tied a stone to their stomach. But the pain, the hunger became unbearable. Abu Talha radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Tirmizi Sharif ki riwayat. They come to the court of Rasulullah sallallahu Abu Talha radiyallahu ta'ala anhu and a few Sahaba, they come to the court of Rasulullah sallallahu Allahu Akbar. Durood Sharif. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina wa Shafiyyina wa Mawlana Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sahabi's name Abu Talha radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He with a few Sahaba came into the bargah in the court of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, the pain is unbearable. We can't cope, Ya Rasulullah. For 3 days we haven't had nothing to eat. We've had nothing to eat. Some of the Sahaba, they lift their shirt and they show a stone tied to their stomach. At that point, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he sees this, Allah, nobody is like the Prophet of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. No example comes even close to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Arabikum fana in the ishq and ghulami of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. At that point, when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw the state of his Sahaba, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, in order to tell them the state of his hunger, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam lifted his blessed kameez. And at this point, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam didn't have one stone tied to his stomach. The Prophet of Allah had 2 stones tied to his stomach. In order to keep themselves upright, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had 2 stones tied to their stomach. A leadership of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's example, bemisal or bemisal. No example like the example of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Today you and me, we need to follow in the Naqsh Qadam of Rasulullah Sallallahu Acha. Sayyidina Jabir radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Jabir bin Abdullah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he sees that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is in this state. Aakhri baat, ek mu'jiza, us to baad zindagi hoi ta fir we'll do the topic Asal Justice next time inshallah. Acha. Sayyidina Jabir radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, and this is Bukhari Sharif ki riwayat, Bukhari. He says that during the days of the Battle of Khandaq, whilst we were digging the trench, he goes, I saw severe symptoms of hunger on the blessed face of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He goes, I went home, I took ijazat from Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, permission from him, and I said to the Prophet of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that, Ya Rasulullah, allow me to go home. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam granted ijazat and permission. Sayyidina Jabir goes home. Mashur riwayat. When they go home, they ask their wife, what do we have? Today I've seen that the Prophet of Allah is extremely hungry. I've seen symptoms of hunger on his face. Tell me, what do we have in our house so that we can do a dawat for Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Sahaba's concern was only the welfare and the well-being of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Not just people of chanting slogans, not just people of nare, that's it. And once a year you come and you bring your Sunni card with you, you get it stamped and you think, now that's it, I'm a Sunni. You come once a year to the Milad gatherings and that's it? No. Sahaba, for them, every single day was Milad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. For every single day that they lived that day in the ishq and ghulami of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. This is why, slightly sidetracking. Sahaba asked Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhu that, Ya Abu Bakr, tell us, who do you love the most? Our Honorable Ustad, Mufassir al-Quran, Imdad al-Ummah, Mohsin al-Sunnah, Hazrat Muhammad Imdad Hussain, Pirzada, Damat Barkatum al-Aliyah, they did not of this to us. We heard it from them. That Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, आजकल लोग कहने that we are do our mubalaghat and we exaggerate in the love of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Then where would you put this waqia? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was asked the question by some Sahaba that who do you love the most? Allah or his Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. For a few moments Abu Bakr as-Siddiq thought about it. And then he gave his jawab, his answer. He goes, the one who is the most beloved to me is Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Ishq or ghulam or aqidah of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala. He goes, the one who is the most beloved to me is Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Sahaba was shocked, amazed. They thought that he would say Allah Almighty. Then they said, why? What's the reason? And at that point, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq gave the reason, and this reason is why we also remember Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He goes, the reason why I love the Prophet of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam more than I love Allah is because of Rasulullah that we have Islam today. It's because of Rasulullah that we have Iman today. It's because of Rasulullah that we have the Quran today. It's because of Rasulullah we know who Rahman is as well today. Rest of the Anbiya and Mursaleen, they only heard that Allah Almighty is one. Our Nabi and Rasul, not only did he hear that Allah is one, but he also saw that Allah Almighty is one as well. Allahu Akbar. And then when he came back down and he told the people, he said, Qul huwallahu ahad. Oh Lord, Allah Almighty, Jalla Jalaluhu is one. Our Nabi and Rasul, absorb yourself in his love and ghulam. Sayyidina Jabir radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he goes to his wife, what? That do we have anything in our home? And she goes that we have maybe some barley and a small goat, kid goat. At that point, Sayyidina Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he slaughtered the goat and they began to crush the barley in order to make flour so they could make bread. And the meat was placed in the pot and the bread was baked and cooked. And ultimately, Sayyidina Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he rushed and went back to the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he went to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and whispered in their blessed ear. And he said, Ya Rasulullah, we have some food at home. I've noticed that you've not eaten for days. I see the symptoms of hunger on you, Ya Rasulullah. We have some food at home. This is my invitation, my dawat. Ya Rasulullah, accept my invitation. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam has never ever said no. His akhlaq. The only time they would say no is in the kalima la ilaha illallah. That's it. That's the only time Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say no. Their sunnat is what? That he sallallahu alaihi wasallam wouldn't say no, wouldn't refuse an invitation. This is just in the middle whilst they're trying to protect their city, Madinatul Munawwara. But Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't want to upset his sahabi, didn't want to refuse an invitation. At that point, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that how much food is there? How much food is there? And Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he explained and said, Ya Rasulullah, there's good, plenty food. If you bring a few sahaba with you, a few companions with you, that should be sufficient. And at that point, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Jabir, tell your wife not to remove the pot from the furnace and not to start distributing until I get there. And when they said this, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam turned to his sahaba. And come of age around 1,000 of them who were digging the trench in order to protect the city of Medina. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam turned to them and said that, O people of the trench, come, Jabir has prepared a feast for us.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah.
Sayyidina Jabir Pashan, right?
Subhanallah.
Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam bin alan, Allahu Akbar. Quickly he back and forth, he runs back home and asks the wife or tells the wife, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they have called all of the Ansar and Muhajirun. At that point, his wife, Jabir's wife said what? That, did you make this announcement? Or did the Prophet of Allah make this announcement?
Subhanallah, Subhanallah.
Aqidah of the Sahaba.
Subhanallah.
This is the wife of Jabir bin Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala. Did you make this announcement? Or did the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam make this announcement? At that point, Jabir bin Abdullah says that, it wasn't me who made the announcement. The announcement was made by the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. At that point, when his wife heard this, she don't worry. The Prophet of Allah knows what he's doing.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah.
Yaqeen, trust in the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At that point, all of the Sahaba with the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrive at the house of Jabir bin Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam enters into the house. They take their blessed saliva and they put it into the pot of meat. And they take their blessed saliva and they put it into that bread as well. Baba, in your and my saliva there's germ and bacteria. But in the saliva of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam there is shifa. There is barakat and khair. He's not like you and me. Take this misconception out of your mind. He is the greatest of Allah Almighty's creation. His bashariyat is haq and his nuraniyat is haq. But in reality, his only haqiqat is known by Allah Almighty. Not even Abu Bakr as-Siddiq knew the reality of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The asal haqiqat and reality of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is only known by his creator, Malik and Khaliq, Allah Almighty Jalla Jalaluhu. Allahu Akbar. Ye kya misconception trying to confuse our youth out there today that he's like you and me. Tell me, does your saliva have this ability to put barakat and khair in food in order to increase that food? No. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam isn't like you and me. He isn't like you and me. Allahu Akbar. When they do this, when the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam do this, when they bless the food, Sahaba tried to come into the house, cram into the house of Jabir, and they come in tens, and one by one food is being distributed. Remember, Sahaba have not eaten for days either. One by one food is being distributed. Each and every one of the Sahaba, they eat to their full. They eat to their full. Until every single Sahabi have ate until they were content. And Sayyidina Jabir says that there was around 1,000 of them.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah.
He says that there was around 1,000 of them. At that point, when all of the Sahaba had eaten, then the Prophet ﷺ ate as well. And when Nabi Islam had finished eating, then Nabi Islam, there was still food left over.
Subhanallah.
One miracle from amongst the miracles of Rasulullah ﷺ. There was still food left over. And at that point, Sayyidina Rasulullah ﷺ, He tells Jabir that Jabir, you also eat this food and distribute this food to the neighbors as well.
Subhanallah.
Distribute this food to the neighbors as well. One miracle, one juz from the ajza of the miracles of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Or akhri baat before you kick me off. I've had this experience.
Subhanallah. Subhanallah.
Baba, it's not my fault, is it? That we want to stand here and praise the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Subhanallah.
Talk about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Usa to thaki jane ho. Asa to thakne na. I've been up since Fajr, working on my presentation in Shahzad Bhai's house. Then I went to Watford. There, adha ghanta lagna takriban. 3 hours doing there, dars. Then 2 hours driving car here. Now sat here as well. And then we'll go somewhere else after this as well. All in the name of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Without fakhr, without any pride or arrogance. All in the name of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I take a qasam by Allah. I take a qasam by Allah. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Subhanallah. Subhanallah.
Log kahni mamsa thaki na jane. Baithna tusan iflat hosan. Mahni. As long as we are praising the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as long as we are doing the remembrance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, alhamdulillah, as long as there is breath in our body, we will continue raising the remembrance of Nabi Islam.
Subhanallah.
Continue praising him. Allahu Akbar. और ये देखो आखिरी जुमला तवज्जो से सुनो असल मौजू तो शुरू नहीं होया लेकिन there's one part that I want to mention ज़ौक़ और शौक़ के लिए in order to make our iman and aqidah pukhta. All of the Anbiya and Mursaleen, they were sent with miracles, but our Nabi and Rasul, he was sent as a miracle.
Subhanallah. Subhanallah.
Did you get that? Previous Anbiya and Mursaleen, they were sent with miracles. Our Nabi and Rasul was sent as a miracle. From head to toe, sar se paun tak, Nabi Islam was a miracle, a personification of a miracle sent by Allah Almighty to the creation.
Subhanallah. Subhanallah.
I'm Konina, but I did mark in Adiyat, I carry this with me everywhere. No, Ibarat is easy to read, that's why. No, I carry it for shifa purposes.
Subhanallah.
I said this once before, I think in live that day, and I'll say it as well. Adiyat as-shifa is a means of shifaat for you and me.
Subhanallah.
Ulama mentioned that household which has a copy of Qadi Iyaz as-shifa بِتَعْرِيفِ حُقُوقِ الْمُصْطَفَى sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In that household, if anybody is ill, then through the barakah of this book, Allah Almighty will remove that illness.
Subhanallah.
Allah. And there's a section in here where Allah Almighty talks about all of the, one by one. Adwa and body part by body part. Allah Ta'ala mentions the body parts of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wadduha, the Chera Mubarak of Nabi sallallahu
Subhanallah.
Layli Iza Saja, the Qadian Zulfan Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ma zagal basar wa ma taqa, the eyesight of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wa ma yantiku anil hawa, the speech of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahu Akbar. From head to toe, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a miracle. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a miracle.
Subhanallah.
Tu zinda hai wallah, tu zinda hai wallah, mere chashme alam se
Chup jaane wale.
My message today was what?
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Shukar hai. Otherwise I would have had to start again.
Subhanallah. Subhanallah.
Absorb yourself in the remembrance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wallahi, have this yearning to see him. When you have gallani mukniya, have this yearning to see him. Khwaja Nizamuddin Awliya rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, Mahbub Ilahi, Mahbub Subhani, when they were on their deathbed, on the day of their visal, Ruknuddin Multani rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi came to see them.
Subhanallah.
Aakhri waqia, ijazat hai, tusa nahi galti hai, tusa hai time legi nahi. Ruknuddin Multani rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, great alim of the deen, he came to whose deathbed? Khwaja Nizamuddin Awliya rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. And they came and they said, Huzur, what is your hal? Long baqiyah, cut in it short. They said, Huzur, what is your hal? At that point they go, I am yearning to meet Allah Almighty.
Subhanallah.
Nizamuddin Awliya rahmatullahi ta'ala, they are saying this. That I have this yearning to meet Allah Almighty, and I only have 1 hour left in this dunya, but this time that I have left is dragging. It feels like forever. He goes, I'm yearning to see Allah, but this time is dragging. At that point, Ruknuddin Multani rahmatullahi ta'ala, they begin to cry. They said, Huzur, tell me what is your hal? And at that point, akhri jumla, tawajjuh se suno, become people who yearn for the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nizamuddin Awliya on their deathbed, Yom Visal, the day of their death. Ruknuddin Multani said, what is your hal? At that point they go, every single night I see the Prophet of Allah in my dreams.
Subhanallah. Subhanallah.
Hai, hai. Humne kya dekha hai? हमने क्या चखया है? कुछ काकी नहीं. Allahu Akbar, those who came before us, they drank from the fountain of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They absorbed themselves in the ishq al-ghulami of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because every single night I get the vision and didar of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And every single night Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says to me that, oh my son, they were Hassani Sayyid. They said, oh my son, I am yearning to meet you.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah.
The Prophet of Allah said, I am yearning to meet you. Sheikh Abdul Haq, Muhaddis Delhi Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayhi nakal of this. And it become those people that you earn that right to sit at the feet of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to stand on the day of Qiyamah under the liwa al-hamd of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to drink from the Jami Kawthar of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Earn that right. Don't be complacent. Don't assume as just a Musliman or if you're born into a Muslim family and we go to a couple of Milad Sharif, say, yeah, and that's it. No. Become those people who follow in the Naqsh Qadam of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Have this yearning and desire to meet the beloved of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala didn't give us these eyes so that we look at ghair mahram women and look at haram. Allah gave us these eyes so that we look at the wadduha chair of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala first give me the tawfiq to act upon what I have said. Very easy doing a bayan. Very easy standing here doing speeches. Very easy, looking colorful and looking very nice in front of people. But asal haqiqat is that we need your du'as more than you need our du'as. Because there is more questioning upon us, those who have knowledge, little bit of knowledge, than there is upon you. So make dua that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala guides me and gives me the tawfiq to do amal upon what I have said. And I make dua that Allah Almighty gives you to tawfiq to do amal upon what you have heard. Become good Muslims, become sincere Muslims, and become true lovers of Rasulullah. 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 وما علينا إلا